Alright, here we go with part 2 of our unit on exploration. Today we're going to be talking about the Columbian Exchange. And basically what happened here was Europe was sending things to the Americas, and their colonists over in the Americas were sending things back, and that really kind of changed lifestyles over in Europe and the Americas as well. And it also led to the exploitation of Africa, people in Africa as well as people in the Americas. So good things came out of it, but a lot of ugliness as well. So the arrival of Europeans in the Americas brought more than a clash of peoples and cultures. It also brought a movement of plants, animals, and diseases between the eastern and western hemispheres. This movement of living things between the hemispheres is called the Columbian Exchange. In the Western Hemisphere, agricultural products such as corn, potatoes, and tobacco changed European lifestyles. And again, it was not really good news for natives in Africa as well as the Americas. Positive effects. Okay, the Spanish brought plants and animals to the New World. Mainly your livestock such as cattle, pigs, and horses, and these did really well in the Western Hemisphere. The climate was optimal and allowed them to adapt pretty easily. Crops from Europe that also thrived in the Americas were wheat, grapes, and onions. So we wouldn't have had grapes in the United States without the European transportation of them over here, or the Columbian Exchange. Crops from the Americas that did well in Europe: potatoes and corn. European horses and cattle changed the lifestyles of American Indians, or first Americans. Negative effects. Some more graphics here. The negative effects was the transfer of germs to the Americas: smallpox, measles, influenza. Natives had no immunity to these diseases, and these European diseases decimated many natives. So you could say the Europeans were a definite biohazard to native populations. They didn't have the immune systems built up, and so they died very quickly and in large numbers. So transfer of germs from the Americas, syphilis, and then the European plantation system in the Caribbean and the Americas destroyed indigenous economics and damaged the environment. So basically, it destroyed their way of life, the way these people had, built their civilizations. Their economies were destroyed. Their way of life, their cultures were pretty much mostly wiped out, and obviously, damage was done to the environment. And again, here's another. Okay, this is all stuff that made its way to the Americas and to Europe. Okay, make sure you memorize all of those for the quiz next class. Just kidding. Alright, so the impact of the Columbian Exchange: shortage of labor to grow cash crops led to the use of slavery. Alright, so if we go back here, when the Indians started dying, more or less, they needed African slaves, or they needed slaves from Africa to come in and work the plantations, because all the Indians had pretty much either been killed or died off from disease. Obviously, last year in World History 1, we talked about how slavery was not based on race. Slavery now started to become a racial, racial problem. And the overall effect of the exchange: by mixing the products of two hemispheres, the Columbian Exchange brought the world closer together. So before, they didn't have these things, now they do, and they're sending things back and forth between the continents, which, again, brings the world closer together. Okay, just like when you send a text to somebody in another country, before you'd have to write a letter and it would take weeks. Now it takes seconds, and it feels like you're closer to that person. All right. So remember, if you got any questions, things you don't understand, want me to go back over, write them down. Sorry, I was about to sneeze there. Write your summary. It's 25 points. And key points, the Columbian Exchange, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, so obviously the good was these animals, these different types of food going back and forth, being shared between the eastern and western hemispheres. The bad and the ugly was the almost extinction, if you will. That might be too big of a word to use, but almost the near wiping out of natives in the Americas, and then obviously the start of the Atlantic slave trade. So finish that up, and I will see you guys next class.